Let's get back to the Connor Happer Show on 1620 The Zone.
We have a little bit of generational warfare, I guess, on our hands. Not with the beef jerky. But can you find out what generation a person is of by if they liked or did not like Shane Gillis doing Saturday Night Live this past weekend? Maybe.
Might tell you something.
There's a lot of things being said. I thought it was funny, for the record. Maybe that makes me just I'm officially in with the young crowd now. But I think he's pretty funny. It's a kind of a controversial episode of people are talking about Saturday Night Live, so maybe it's working. All right. So we'll talk about each of the basketball teams from this weekend individually, and should there be any concern level for Creighton? By the way, no. Nebraska basketball and the T word. We'll get to that. So we'll get to them individually. But I wanted to do this as an exercise, partly because number one, I've started to I realized that I have Photoshop, and I wanted to just put it to use and use some, throw in some graphics and stuff like that. I'm kind of designing some other things. So I was playing around in there last night and said, you know what? Let's play a little blind resume game. Josh, is this going to be about, what's this going to be about? Nothing? It's going to be about court storming. All right, David, hang on with us for just a few minutes here, because I want to do this segment. So blind resume game, Josh. I have laid out, join us on the YouTube if you're interested in seeing all this, but I'll sort of explain it as well. I've laid out 5 teams. Their net rankings are all in the top 20, except for one. And then I have, and by the way, before we get to this is not everything. These stats are not the only things, but they are some of the things that are looked at as it pertains to either the NCAA tournament or how good you're viewed in the public eye, whatever it might be. But as you can see at the top, if you're joining with us at 1620thezone.com or on YouTube TV or YouTube 1620thezone TV, the records are all relatively similar. There's a 5-loss team, there's 3 8-loss teams, and there's a 6-loss team. The Nets are all in the top 20 except one. Pretty similar amounts of top 100 wins. I'm going by KenPom. By the way, I'm doing this as of last night, so if it's just adjusted all as of this morning, then sorry. Losses outside of the top 100 of KenPom. Most of the good teams in the country have 0. A couple apparently have enough strength in their resume where they do not have this. And then the best wins with their KenPom rating and where you did it. Now, I sent this to Josh last night.
You did, and I've been thinking about it ever since.
I've been thinking about it ever since, and I wanted to full-blown have the conversation with him last night, but he did give me an initial thought on the team and the resume that stuck out to him the most. And which column was that, Josh?
That would be the 4th column.
The 4th column is a record of a team who is 20-8.
They're 11th in the net.
Net 11 wins against top 100 KenPom teams.
That's more than any other resume that you've given me here.
0 losses versus any teams outside the top 100 KenPom, and wins over number 3, 7, at 34, and 39.
Some of the best wins on that particular team's resume.
I will tell you, Josh, the identity of that team if you're interested.
I think I know it, but
what is it?
I think that's Creighton.
That's Creighton.
That's not why I picked them, but afterwards I got to thinking about it. I'm like,
that's Creighton.
I think that's Creighton.
That is Creighton. I gave you now. You'll see because we're going to put up the ones with the teams here. I'll put up the graphic with the teams here in just a second. But and I'll tell you I'll tell you what I think about all this stuff. What do you think about that second column right there? 20-8, 8 top 100 wins over the number 2, 20, and 22 teams in the country. 0 losses out of the top 100. You know who this is, right?
Okay.
You know who this is.
I know who it is.
Yeah.
And I know you want me to. I actually agree with what you want me to say, so I will play along. That team should be ranked higher, Connor.
That's Nebraska.
Oh my gosh.
That's Nebraska. The second column that you're looking at right now, if you're watching along with us, is Nebraska. 20-8, 41 in the net, 8 top 100 wins, 0 losses outside the top 100, and 3 wins over top 25 teams. KenPom.
I'm very curious who this 5th team is because
that's a funny resume, isn't it?
I'll bet it's a perennial power in the sport because that resume is the worst of the 5.
Why don't you pull it up?
Okay.
Why don't you give me the identity of these teams?
All right.
And we'll talk a little bit more about it. Go ahead and throw it up on there.
Now, I genuinely don't know who these teams are.
Josh doesn't know. We're doing live blind resume right now. And here comes the identity of the teams.
Duke, of course.
It's Duke.
They stink.
Travis on the YouTube, is the 5th Duke? Indeed, the 5th is Duke. So if you're watching along with this, we've identified these teams. And I want to tell you a little bit about some of these teams as they're being viewed throughout the country right now. So the first column is Dayton. Dayton is 21-5 with a net ranking of 20. 6 wins against the top 100 KenPom, 0 losses outside the top 100. Their best wins come against the 39th ranked team, that's St. John's at a neutral court, at 45, and then 89 on a neutral court. Everybody, the bracket matrix, which is a conglomeration of all the bracket projections that we have, Dayton is a 5.
Everybody wants me to pick Dayton to go to the Sweet 16.
Dayton is a bracket matrix 5 right now.
Okay.
Whose resume is better, Nebraska or Dayton?
Nebraska.
Nebraska is being talked about as a bubble team / a 10, right? I've seen, if you look at the bracket matrix, the highest projection has Nebraska at an 8. Most of them have them at a 10, some 9s, and then some 11s as well. They need to update their brackets. Nebraska ain't no 11 seed right now. They're just they're just not. So by the way, whoever said that getting big wins over, average teams didn't do anything for you, because I've gained a lot of confidence in them over the last couple of weeks, and we'll talk about that. The third column is BYU. BYU is 19-8. They play in what many say is the best conference in America.
Many people say this.
They have a net ranking of 13. They have 8 top 100 wins. They have no top 100 losses. They've won games on their home floor against the 11th, 14th, and 16th rated KenPom teams in the country. I don't see hardly any difference in that column between them and Nebraska.
Yeah.
BYU up until, and I could check it right now, BYU up until last week was like a top 10 KenPom team in the country. They're number 18 right now. BYU is a 5 on the bracket matrix, right next to Dayton. All right. Then we go to the Blue Jays. 20-8, net ranking of 11, a bunch of great wins, 11 top 100 wins this year. They've beaten the 3, 7, 30 at 34, 39. That is, UConn, Alabama, at, who would 34 be? At Nebraska, and then St. John's on their home floor, who's 39 in the KenPom right now. No bad losses on their resume. Creighton just came off the week where they beat the number 1 team in the country. They are a bracket matrix 4 seed at the moment. The Duke Blue Devils, who Josh correctly identified this 5th team as a perennial power, who is up there because for reasons. They play in a good conference. They're 21-6, net ranking of 10 wins against the top 100, 2 eyesore losses for Duke. Duke lost to Arkansas and Georgia Tech. Those games were both on the road, but those are 2 losses outside of the top 100 for Duke.
Mm.
They played 20 on a neutral court and beat them, 14 on a neutral court and beat them, 24-19. So 20 and by the way, the identity of the teams that they beat Michigan State on a neutral court. They beat Baylor on a neutral court. And gosh, who else did I have on there? 24-19.
Yes.
Clemson and Wake Forest.
And I mean, grain of salt with that Wake Forest law. Like, oh my gosh, several players almost died.
Now that wasn't the one from over the weekend. That was the one on their home floor from Cameron a few weeks ago.
Can they not beat Wake Forest?
Duke, no, they beat Wake Forest the first time.
The first time.
Duke is a bracket matrix 3 seed at the moment.
Seems pretty vulnerable.
Now, once again, these columns don't tell you the full story. And I'll tell you what's a little bit different about Nebraska than the rest of these teams. But for those of you who are talking about, hey, we got to rank Nebraska, if we've made it like the sole thing to like, hey, we have to get into the NCAA tournament this year. Yeah, absolutely. But it shouldn't be about scraping into this thing. Nebraska, with their resume and what they've been now for the last 2 weeks, timing is important in this thing too, right? What have you done for me lately? They haven't suffered any major injuries or anything like that. Like, honestly, it feels like they're peaking and they're getting better right now. I don't know why Nebraska is a 10 seed. I don't know why we're talking about Nebraska as a 10 seed. If you just look at those numbers that I obviously cherry picked, like those are just the numbers that but I think they're, holistic, like representative of the resume from the entire season. It's not just like, here's where Nebraska is good and nobody else is good. No, I mean, they're very comparable to all of the other 4 teams on that list. And Nebraska's being looked at as a 10 seed right now. The shame, I guess, in the end of the season for them is I don't know what they can do to prove it to people that they do belong higher. But I'll say this, if they're in the NCAA tournament as a 10, if I'm a 7, I feel really jobbed by this.
Also because that game's going to be in Omaha.
Also because that game's going to be in Omaha. Right. Of course, Nebraska finishes with Ohio State, Rutgers, and Michigan. And those are games that I don't know. I know Ohio State's got some mojo going right now. Maybe just on the weekends. Maybe you can get them during the week. Shout out to Jake Diebler, just beating top teams on the weekends, Purdue and Michigan State, while losing to Minnesota midweek. But Rutgers and Michigan, I would expect them to kind of take care of business. Michigan won't be a cakewalk on the road, but that's not the image of a 10 seed.
Quick message for Dayton: play somebody. I understand you can't help who's in your conference. Find a game in the non-con. You did not this year.
Well, they did. They just lost. They tried.
They lost to Northwestern.
Didn't they play Houston in the non-con?
Oh, if they did, I missed that. I'm sorry.
Yeah, they lost to Houston.
That's not the team to pick.
They lost to Houston in the non-con.
And their game against UNLV did get canceled.
So. It did? Oh, yeah, because of the shooting, right? Yeah.
Sure. I don't know.
It was something that happened on their campus.
Okay.
Yeah. So they are in the conference that they're in, and they can only, have. But some of this is about where you start, and if they think that they're going to be good and the metrics sort of check out.
Now, Dayton did beat St. John's.
Dayton beat St. John's. They're probably their best win of the season to date. That's a team that's fighting for their NCAA tournament lives right now. Right? So I wanted to play this game to maybe hold on, I'll get there. I know what you just saw.
Okay.
I know what you just saw. I wanted to play this game to sort of maybe like embolden Nebraska fans to say, hey, look, man, like And you don't like, I don't want you to take this like, hey, now we have to go yell and scream from the top of the mountaintops, Nebraska should be seated higher. What I'm telling you is when you get to the dance, you have done things that some teams who are going to be seated 4, 5, 6 seed lines higher than you haven't done. You have this experience, right? So maybe you're wearing a red jersey in Omaha on the first day of the NCAA tournament or the second day of the NCAA tournament, but like Nebraska's not going to run into anything that they haven't seen before outside of the context of it's an NCAA tournament game, right? They have all these things that are kind of on their walls at this point. So, they should be seated a little bit higher. They should be receiving votes today. Greg writes in. He says, unfortunately, it's all about history or lack thereof. I think there's a little bit of that that goes into there.
For sure.
But the net is the net, right? And so Travis, I think, made the point earlier, and he said, hey, look, it's Nebraska had some losses in the season. They were kind of like, whoa, they got a little sideways on them. So, everything's important in the net. It's how many games you lose, to who you lose them to, and where you lose them to, and by how many. Nebraska getting blown out by Wisconsin on the road the first time around. Nebraska getting blown out by Creighton. Like, I'd love to see just the weight that each of these individual games. But keep in mind, I mean, they haven't got blown out, I guess, since the Maryland game, which was now almost one entire month ago.
That was the blackout too. I mean, you can't
expect to go there and win.
Blackout.
But like they're playing like a real confident group right now. And so you're peaking at the right time. And maybe being a 10 seed like isn't the worst thing in the world.
Yeah, what do you want to do? You want people to fear you entering the tournament, or do you want to be unsuspecting? Like,
all I'm saying is if I'm a 7 and I get Nebraska, and especially if I get them in Omaha.
Nope.
If I'm a 7 and I get Nebraska, I'm triggered. Because I look at their resume. Like I'd be talking about that all week. Let's see. Who are the bracket matrix 7s right now?
Oh yeah, good.
Colorado State, Utah State, Florida, South Carolina. If I'm Utah State, I'm like, what did we do to deserve this? And that actually sounds like a pretty interesting first round matchup. But like, we got to go to Omaha and we got to play these guys. Look at their resume. Look at who they've beat this year. Look at what they've done, and look at the way that they're playing right now.
Lenardi's got him up against Florida.